Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Welcome to the live stream. Garner-Purkis and Callum Cuddeford here. We're going to be reacting live to, we can just see them taking their seats, and you should be able to there. Sadiq Khan and Samar Rowley down at London Assembly. And yeah, we'll just be keeping an eye on what they're going to say. Because this is the first time, isn't it, Cal, that they have... that they've answered questions since we've done all the stories that we have been.
Yeah, it's the first time that they've sat next to each other. So Mark Rowley actually did go up in front of the London Assembly 24 hours after the deadline to apply for our first investigation, and that's when he revealed that there were multiple multi-offender child sexual exploitation cases and a very significant number of historic ones that the Met would need to review, and that was only 24 hours after we went for the deadline on our right of reply.
Should we take this back to the beginning, because not everyone will be aware of where this story started and what's going on today. So where did, from your perspective, where did it start with Sadiq Khan and grooming gangs, or Samar Rowley? Because both of these, Samar Rowley, head of the Metropolitan Police, the most important police officer in the biggest police force in the UK. Where did it start?
Well, and Sadiq Khan, the Police and Crime Commissioner as well. For me, it started when that video with Susan Hall went viral at the start of the year. We saw Susan Hall questioning the mayor on rape gangs, grooming gangs in the capital. He asked her what she meant by that repeatedly. He's since been accused of sort of deflecting away from what the real core of the question was, which was about child sexual exploitation by groups of men in London. That caught my eye as a crime reporter, court reporter working in London. The answer that, or I don't know what she means, or later on, there's no indication, no reports of this, seemed a little bit unlikely, and I think other people have shared that view. And when you're in a position as a journalist and you feel like you have some sort of obligation to look into stuff and sort of scrutinize what politicians are saying. So for me, that's what kickstarted it. Then I started putting in FOI requests. All of the local authorities in London, it seemed to me that would be the best way to find out, rather than going to the Met Police and the mayor who are saying one thing, to actually go to the sort of the source of information.
Okay, so what we should just say now is this is Len Duval speaking. He is the chair of the London Assembly, so sort of like the Speaker in the House of Commons, right?
He's probably one of the most senior Labour politicians in the GLA, apart from Sadiq Khan.
Yeah, and so he was also the person that asked Mark Rowley the first question, where they actually admitted. Some of you might have seen that there were 9,000 cases being reviewed. The first indication we got of that was this Len Duval speaking to Sir Mark during it was a similar kind of event to itself, where he was appearing before the London Assembly, right? And yeah, so the way that this event is going to work is Len Duval will talk for a bit. He'll then set it up for a kind of opening address from the mayor and Sir Mark Rowley. We don't know whether they're going to deal with grooming gangs or not. They might address it early on. They might also get a question from one of the Labour members early on. And then what's going on now, Callum? Can we say that everyone's standing up? Okay, if you're wondering, that was a silence for remembrance.
That was a minute of silence, wasn't it?
Yes, caught us a little bit off guard.
Yeah.
We hadn't glitched there. That was that was
Yeah.
just paying our respects to the fallen. So the way this is going to work is that me and Callum are just going to kind of talk you through it. And whilst this is we've kind of got the bits where they're not covering the grooming gangs, we're going to just talk to you and answer any questions that you've got about what we've been doing in the story so far. So just, you know, throw those in the comments, and more than happy to tackle them. And then when we get stuck into the action, what we're going to do is we'll listen along and watch along with yourself, but then we're going to pause it at various points to react to what might take place. As I was saying to you before, Cal, like we don't know whether they're going to address grooming gangs. We suspect it will come up in a question from the Conservatives or from Reform, but we don't know who it's going to come from or when it will. They may address it. It may come from a Labour member and they may try to get ahead of it. But this is the first time these are to answer questions after we started reporting on this, really, and it's all kind of blown up.
Yeah, so you asked me earlier where I started with this and how I got into it. What about you? Where did you start looking at this?
For me, I think it was I can't remember whether it was a tip or something that came through, but I started to look at the Sadiq Khan and grooming gangs, and as a lot of you will have noticed, it was this exchange that he had with Susan Hall where she asked him in quite plain English, do we have any of these grooming gangs? And he pulls a face. And I mean, this clip has become very famous. And he says, can you be more specific? I'm not sure what you mean. Which was just odd, right? It would have been the easiest thing for him in the world to just say, we're really concerned about this issue. We're looking into it. You know, thank you for your interest and all the rest of it. And then the more that I explored it, the harder the line in the sand was that had been drawn by both the Met Police and by Sadiq Khan. And I think that's an important thing to remember because there was a big shift. When was it? 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, I think it's October 16th.
Yeah. So this is... and what we should say is that in January, when that exchange took place between Susan Hall and Sadiq Khan, the Met Police and Sadiq Khan had not used the term grooming gangs. Grooming gangs had been used in the past by other politicians in London, but the mayor and the Met seem to be making a specific choice not to say that. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, I think it would be. I still think we haven't really had any explanation. Maybe we'll find out why today, but we really haven't had any explanation why it seems it looked like they took questions from Susan Hall to mean one thing without even sort of trying to reach any clarification on that. It seemed to anyone watching that it was quite obvious. Susan Hall even went to efforts to explain exactly what she meant. You know, she said things like young girls being coerced into sex, young girls being raped, and the police and the mayor kept coming back, searching for some sort of different meaning in there. So
we just had a question come in from Linksminks06, who asks, how many children have gone missing in London and what are their ages if known? Now, this is a very important point to make because actually a lot of the time the children that are involved, the first indication that they might being exploited is when they start going missing. As far as I'm aware, we don't necessarily know the overall number. You, Callum, have spoken to a lot of like frontline workers specifically about this topic, right?
Well, I think, anecdotally you hear about thousands of children going missing a year. It just depends how long for, and that can blow up in the news. But I would say, just being a local reporter as well, you have children that go missing every day. The media put out appeals, and then sometimes the police will say that child has been found and they'll ask us to take down the appeal. But then there are, I think concerningly, part of doing this investigation, we've actually looked back and we've seen appeals that are still up from the 2000s or something like that. And we know from our sources that child has actually been involved or been a survivor, victim of a grooming gang. And so I think it's something to remember, actually, that really clear connection that someone like Maggie Oliver has spoken to us. When you see a child going missing repeatedly, it's not for no reason, especially if there's being reported in conjunction with some other allegation of child sexual exploitation. That's a huge red flag for any professional.
Yeah, and when you go back to the start of this, one of the first people that I spoke to was John Wedger, who was a police officer in Haringey in the 2000s, and I looked through his notes from the time, and the way that he started to identify whether children had been a victim of child sexual exploitation was by going to children's homes and asking how many kids went missing on a weekend. And when they would go to and from, and that's the starting point. So it is a really important part of it. And actually, the fact that we can't say, oh yeah, there's just a clear number and we know what age is, that's part of the problem here. Okay, Sadiq Khan is starting to speak.
I'm just going to sort of tune into what he's saying.
Should we have a bit of a listen and see what he's saying?
£1.16 billion annually, more than double than the previous mayor. This funding is helping to protect neighbourhood policing in our communities and is ensuring that the Met can take tough action on crimes like shoplifting and phone theft. This includes, for example, increasing the police presence in hotspot areas in the West End by 50%. As Mayor, continue to invest record amounts from City Hall.
So yeah, this is kind of just to explain what's going on. The mayor gets an opportunity to make a statement. We don't know if he's going to mention grooming gangs.
Without in any way excusing violent crime, the causes are extremely complex and involve deep-seated issues, including poverty, inequality, and lack of opportunities for young people. That's why I'll continue to provide positive opportunities for young Londoners, fund activities for children during the school holidays, and support our violence reduction unit, which is working to prevent crime.
So again, this is like the mayor's
so far has helped to create more than 500,000 positive opportunities to divert vulnerable young Londoners away from criminal gangs and crime
going straight into
towards
this.
Training.
Speaking to people this morning, they were saying that they thought that
the good news
mention some other
is
stuff,
that we know
Brazil,
our approach is working.
To go to
despite our population rising by more than a million, and austerity from the previous government, since 2016. Violence with injury is down by 14%. Homicide is down by 22%.
Again,
burglary is down by 29%, a reduction of nearly 20,000 offences. Gun crime with a lethal discharge is down by nearly 50%. And compared to last year, knife crime is down by 18%. Personal robbery is down by 13%. And theft from the person is down by 16%. In addition, the number of murders in the capital in the first 9 months of this year was the lowest since monthly records began and represents a fall of 58% compared to 2003. We've all seen how some politicians and commentators are desperate to
when you hear this crime data, Callum, you're a crime and court political agenda. Does that reflect?
Of course, we still have a long way to go.
Does this?
And we must never be
I'm listening
complacent.
to this, and it's sort
but the truth is,
how do I
we're making progress
make
in London, and according to the ONS, you're less likely to be a victim of violent crime in our capital than across the rest of England and Wales. After 14 years of cuts by the previous government, the funding landscape for the Met remains challenging. The new government has already increased police funding, and I'll continue to make the case for the additional investment the Met desperately needs. I want to finish, Chair, by talking about police reform, which remains a key priority for me. Whilst the Met has taken significant action since the case review, the appalling footage in the recent BBC documentary shows how much further the Met
or looking at data in comparison to maybe like cities, but of course other places in Europe or in America, they have different laws, different cultures, and so I think the real test of whether someone is doing well is what were they given at the start and where are we at now, and I think that's the sort of thing that a journalist should be looking at when they're assessing using data how the mayor's term has gone.
All right, so
32 boroughs in London. I was in Islington a couple of nights ago.
Mark Rowley's now speaking. So yeah, thanks for heads up, guys. We'll try not to speak.
The reaction and the conversations with communities feel different.
And pause it. But let's see what he's going to say.
Stories that my local officers on neighbourhood teams on each of those boroughs feels different, and they're much closer to local communities fighting the crimes that matter to them. I'm proud of what they're achieving in a smaller organisation where they're managing to be more productive and achieve more. The mayor has gone through some of the facts and figures, so I won't repeat them. But starting at that neighbourhood level, we're now arresting 1,000 people more a month in a smaller organisation. That's more than 10% increase where we were about 18 months ago.
So
that is helping to drive down crime and sort of reductions in robbery, theft from person, burglary, etc. That are the points the mayor made.
I imagine.
If we then sort of step into violence against women and girls, our outcome rates, the cases we're solving, is 2 or 3 times what it was a couple of years ago, and we've gone from being one of the poorest forces in the country to one of the better ones. There's still obviously a long way to go. Those are a consequence of, even in a smaller organisation, we have tipped resources towards what matters most to the public, and we've gone from having 3,300 officers and PCSOs in neighbourhoods to 4,300, so an increase by 1,000, and we've increased by nearly 600 the number of officers in violence against women and girls. The point about productivity is interesting. So that increase in the resources to deal with violence against women and girls is about 20%. And yet they've more than doubled the proportion of cases solved. So that's illustrative of the outstanding work.
Obviously, quite closely linked to some of the stuff that our investigation is focused on. No doubt, some are coming out early in the London Assembly Day to put that sort of foreground in place.
Okay, I think what we're going to do, guys, is when there's something interesting that's said, what I'll do is I'll just pause it and then we can jump in so we don't miss anything rather than it being on mute. But that should be when the questions start rolling in.
But there is, of course, more to do, and that's what we're working on in New Metropolitan too. Despite the bearing down on standards and sort of sadly having to remove 1,500 people in the last 3 years, which is creating a much better environment, and that stands on the shoulders of all the good officers who care about the Met and reporting colleagues for disgraceful behaviour. There's more to do. I think the Panorama programme showed that with, as they described it, the sort of those who are more determined to behave in disgraceful ways are hunkering down, are sort of going underground, and we're going after them. Operations sort of more recently that are finally worth mentioning. I think Operation Zoridon, the organised crime behind shoplifting, which you see in corner shops, reselling goods stolen from mainstream shops. We've closed down several shops across London on that and starting to break down the organised crime behind shoplifting, whilst we double the number of shoplifters we're prosecuting this year.
The grooming gangs
Operation Echo Steep, that big anti-mobile phone theft operation at all tiers, from street theft all the way to international organised crime, where the one group we believe were exporting 40,000 stolen phones a year from London and are now charged with various organised crime offences. And sort of many other such operations are helping make progress day in and day out for Londoners. Thank you.
So nothing there from...
Okay, so the first Assembly member I'm going to call is Assembly Member Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. My questions will be to the Commissioner, please, this morning, if that's okay. So I'd like to begin by noting that in the last 2 years, the Jewish population in London has been subjected to a steady increase, perhaps even a rising tide, of anti-Semitic abuse. And many Jews that speak to me are intensely critical of the Met's failure to take action on those who chant particular chants. In particular, one that springs to mind is From the River to the Sea, which they believe has signalled to the anti-Jewish hate mob that there are no consequences for this behaviour.
So just to explain a little bit what's going on, I'll try not to jump in too much, but basically now it's a chance for some of the Assembly members to ask questions. So we're fully expecting that grooming gangs will come up in this, and this will be the first time that Sadiq and Samart Rowley have been publicly had to face questions in this sort of live environment. They have answered. Sadiq did do some interviews with ITV and PA a little while back.
And it should be made completely unacceptable, not excused. Anyone who thinks it's okay for people to chant that hateful phrase needs to consider what it is calling for Palestine to be free from. They mean free from Jews. So, as I said, an overwhelming majority of British Jews, including those in London that I speak to regularly, know what this chant means. It means kill all the Jews. And earlier this week, when I met Israelis whose friends and family have experienced firsthand exactly what it meant on October the 7th to them, they share those views. So given the experience of the past 2 years, Sir Mark, do you regret the Met Police not taking stronger action against this particular chant?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. So firstly, the effect of the 7th of October terrorist attack in Israel and the follow-on military action and all the death and destruction we've seen in the Middle East over a substantial period you see it playing out on the streets of London because of us being such a sort of globally connected city. Hate crime has risen for Jews and for Muslims over that period, most significantly for Jews, as you say. After an initial surge up, it is lower than it was in the months after October 7th, but it is still higher than it was and still worrying.
So I'll just jump in and explain something else, which is that the members all have a specific amount of time. Yeah. So there is a possibility that we could get cut off with this, which would be quite interesting if it is on that topic, or how much time is left for
like a filibuster.
Yeah, that could occur. So we anticipate that Susan Hall might ask about this, and if she does, there could be a bit of a back and forth, and it will be interesting to see how that plays out.
When it comes to public order legislation, we've used the powers available to us under the law to greater effect with greater assertiveness than we ever have done before. We've put more conditions on protests. We've made more arrests at protests for public order offences, hate crime offences, terrorist offences than ever before. But we operate under the law. There are a range of opinions about what different phrases means. Everything that is marginal and contentious, we have tested with CPS, we've tested with lawyers, that is it something that is prosecutable? And we are prosecuting everything that CPS are prepared to prosecute. That's not said in the sense of criticising them, that's just in terms of their judgment as the law officers they are. And so we're using the law as robustly as possible. If Parliament wants to change the balance in terms of what's allowed in protest, what's allowed in language, that's a matter of Parliament. Policing polices without fear or favour, and we do that as robustly as we can do, taking full account of the impact on protests and language on communities.
Thank you for that response. I would suggest that perhaps not enforcing the law as robustly as you can and you do have the powers for. This is a genocidal chant. It is an insightful chant, and under the Public Order Act, the legislation that we have, we don't need additional powers. You can, and in my view, and in the view of many of the people that I speak to, should be more robust, should be stepping in to a greater degree when that particular chant is given. And one of your predecessors, Sir John Stevens, commented last year that I don't know why there is a feeling there's not.
Just to kind of bring the volume down on this, because obviously we're going to get back and forth on this. We are looking specifically at the grooming gangs stuff. I mean, obviously you get to see that they can actually put a real question to the police. This is one of the few occasions that you see the top person in the Met that is actually answering something in this manner, right? Being challenged, why are you not arresting people? In this case, it's about protests.
Yeah, they actually go into quite a lot of detail. And we know that when there are things, because it's policing that we're talking about, when there are things that they can't talk about in public, they will actually go behind the scenes and brief the GLA members privately if there's something that they want to talk about, but it could affect operational activity.
Yeah, and I mean, it's obviously with this also, everyone is making it's their moment, isn't it? You know, these things are now clipped up and put on social media. I mean, if it wasn't for the visibility that we have of this, maybe we would really never have ventured into this story.
Well, I mean, there'll probably be teams on both sides of the politicians asking the questions. Sadiq Khan's PR team, Sir Martin Rowley's PR team, they'll both be hoping that they can get something that they can put out, or they can come out of it sort of unscathed. But I'm sure that everyone sort of in this situation will have a plan as to the message that they want to get across today.
Yeah. What I would say is that, look, guys, if you just want the raw stuff and just to watch this is not necessarily the stream for you. Please throw questions up there. We're more than happy to talk about any of the the investigations that we've been doing into this, but we're not going to miss the key section when we anticipate they'll be answering questions on grooming gangs. Obviously, Sir Mark is still answering this question on protests at the moment.
Yeah.
But we'll drop in again once he finishes talking. Yeah, I mean, this is just it'll be interesting to see. I think, look, you can tell they're giving long answers, and that might be a bit of a tactic. But I think that when this topic gets brought up, it will be telling the looks on their faces, right? Because this is the first time that Sadiq Sir Sadiq and Sir Mark are going to have to face the music.
I just think while we're waiting for them to finish talking about protests, which is obviously a big issue in London at the moment with the amount of officers that are taken away from frontline policing. I just wanted to ask you, why do you think grooming gangs, why does it matter, like in London? Why does it matter to Londoners?
Why does it matter to Londoners?
Why does this subject matter?
I mean, it's the most vulnerable people in London. These two guys up here now are the two people that ultimately are responsible for protecting, looking after, or making sure when the worst happens and the most vulnerable people are exploited, that justice is taken against them. I mean, I think the fact that they refused to use the term grooming gangs for a long time is just shocking. London's a complicated city and there's a lot goes on, and we're often, because the national stuff is centered in London, sometimes stuff that happens in London maybe gets missed. And I think definitely on this topic, it was overlooked in just a pretty disgraceful way, not just by the politicians involved, but by the media. Like, more journalists should have been out in Tower Hamlets and Hounslow and Hillingdon and all the places that we found serious questions about potential grooming gangs, and digging into that more.
Is that been one of the most stunning sort of aspects for you? Because certainly for me, I wasn't around back then. I mean, even I reported on the Met Police inspection reports and sort of didn't make the leap at the time, even though I was reporting on it. But it seemed to me that a lot of the stuff that we looked at in our investigation was actually sitting there. And for example, a national inquiry that happened, the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse, a lot of the stuff that was mentioned directly about London didn't seem to have made it into any local newspaper or even a national paper covering London. We couldn't find it, not to say it's not there, but we certainly couldn't find it. And we had to actually go into the National Archives and pull it out. So I guess that's something that I found pretty shocking. But what about you?
Well, it's interesting. We just had a question that come in saying, difficult to answer, from LinkedMinx06 again. Difficult for you to answer, I imagine, but you must have some idea / evidence of the names of people involved with grooming. It's been there. There are names involved. We've got more names. Yeah. We're not in a position yet to because you've got to be completely sure when you go with one of these things. But I mean, yes, it's all been sat there, and I think it's like, we only have some names. What Sir Mark Rowley and the rest of his team, they'll have we already know that they've got 197 cases that they've referred to the National Crime Agency. So that's already hundreds of names that they have for people involved. We've got some involved in documented cases. But this, what we need to do is continue to follow these things as they go through the courts, because in the next couple of years, it is going to come out. I think we could be looking at scandals that are on the same scale, probably more so than what we've seen in provincial northern towns.
Yeah, just talking about names for a second there, like I can give an example of Stratford in Newham. There's allegations from young girls that they've been raped. The police actually talk about this publicly. It's called Operation Granby. In the course of my investigation using FOI requests, I was able to find out the names of 3 guys that were eventually taken to court. However, they weren't prosecuted for sexual offences. So that's a reason that we haven't published it, because we're not in a position to publish the outcome of that if they haven't actually been convicted, even though they've clearly been linked to the grooming gang allegations that happened in that area. So that's the sort of difficulty you can find yourself in journalistically when you're trying to expose this sort of stuff. Yeah,
I think, what I fully believe and what I would like us to do is that I think that sat there in those court records, we have got bona fide grooming gangs that we just, like, their names are there and it's part of it. It's just that the dots haven't been put together. But we will get there and this will all come out. And look, we know the police are working on this. We know the National Crime Agency are working on this. So they're going to have to get results, because one thing that we can do is keep the scrutiny up, and the eyes of the country are on them, are on London, to sort it out and deliver results. And if Mark Rowley or Sadiq Khan actually mean what they've said in the interactions that they've had since our stories have come out, they are, they are claiming to be determined to bring people to justice. So we'll see that in the courts, and we'll learn a lot more, because at the moment, we've just been having to kind of take their word for the nature of the offending. We'll be able to judge a bit more of that when some of these cases actually start coming to court.
Oh yeah, and also, so far, I think it's important to say that we haven't been personally sort of judging the nature of a case. We've actually been using frontline experts, people like Maggie Oliver. Another person that's been a really crucial source of information is Chris Wilde, who's a care leaver that was up in Halifax, himself being in care, him knowing about the sort of things that can happen, him then working in London for many years. Other people we've spoken to, we've spoken to survivors as well, and getting them to actually tell us, does that we can go with the information and say, oh, that potentially looks like a grooming gang, but we're just journalists actually giving it to an expert and asking them to assess it.
We've never said any of these because we can't judge that, but we have had Maggie Oliver, who is the expert. She was we wouldn't even know about grooming gangs if it wasn't for her essentially leaving her job in the police and becoming a whistleblower. And if anyone can spot the pattern of a grooming gang, it's Maggie. So when we found a potential case, we put it in front of her. Like not every news outlet has done the same thing. I think with some of them, it is bleedingly obvious.
Yes.
But, that's an important part of the process that we want to have. So we're not just throwing that term around willy-nilly. We're basing that on what experts
and it's important to say that when we did that, there were actually cases where, for example, Maggie turned around and said, no, I don't think that fits the bill, because she takes that sort of forensic approach to assessing it. So I think it's also important, while just on the subject of Maggie, to say that her foundation has been an absolute sort of source of aid and just a brilliant resource for survivors. And I think we wouldn't have the sort of exposure that we have now without Maggie's foundation giving people that have been through this somewhere to go and speak to people.
No, that's absolutely true. I mean, that's the thing I think that is worth mentioning as well, which is that, like, again, we're tuning in. These are two of the most powerful people in London, two of the most powerful men in London. What survivors came to me and were saying was they felt that they were gaslighting them by denying that grooming gangs existed. And it's hard to disagree with that. It's what they've gone through and continue to go through and have not had any justice or even, been acknowledged as being someone, as something that's real and something that's happened to them is just been shocking. And it's these two guys. Like, I mean, what I'd like to see is, for one of them to just say sorry for the way that things went previously. We don't seem to have got that so far, and I'd be stunned if it happens now, though, right?
Well, yeah, we'll see. We'll see what approach Susan Hall or other Assembly members take if they do go and ask questions about this.
Yeah, well, because, I think the thing of, like, when Sadiq Khan had that back and forth with Susan Hall, what he should, like, he might not necessarily known how that was going to come across, but what he should have realized is, since that's been seen by loads of survivors who feel like he is denying their existence and denying what's happened to them, he should just come out and say, look, I'm sorry if that's, that I came across that way. I shouldn't have spoken. I shouldn't have been as flippant about an issue that is so serious.
I think that's the important thing to stress. This is probably the worst thing that could happen to someone without being murdered. And a lot of the cases that we have seen end up with young girls taking their own lives. I don't think we can really come upon a more serious topic than this when it comes to crime.
Yeah. So should we tune back? What's
Lib Dem lead, I think Gareth Roberts, is currently asking questions.
Yes. So how many have we had so far? We've had, this is
I think it's the third.
The third. So it should probably be Susan Hall after this, who, again, we can't guarantee, but it would be surprising if she didn't raise topics of grooming gangs. I mean, it was her clip that went viral and, sparked a lot of this stuff up. Yeah, it's interesting, actually. There's been a lot of smart Rowley answering questions. I mean, what I don't understand is, like, if you're the Lib Dems or the other, is this not a priority for them as well to speak about? I get that there are other things, and, like, London's a big city with a lot of concerns, but I just struggle to see topics that are not as in, other topics are more important.
Well, I wonder if behind the scenes there's any communication about how best to share the sort of load and who's in the best position to ask those questions.
Yeah, although we should mention that the Lib Dems and the Greens and Labour voted down the chance to have
it was a £4.45 million inquiry that was suggested by Lord Sean Bailey of Paddington in January at the start of the year. I think he called for sort of a victim survivor centred inquiry in London.
Yeah, which is now, I mean, I think it's, a lot of the scrutiny and pressure that these two men are facing, that could have been headed off if they'd have just spent that £4 million on it, right?
Well, yeah, I think that sort of money really pales in comparison to the sort of trauma that we've heard directly from survivors that we've spoken to. If there's anything that you're going to spend £4.5 million on, you'd hope it would be something like this. However, I think it's an important question to ask is, do these sort of inquiries work? Are they necessary, or do we just need to be doing what the Met is doing now and is going back through the cases and hopefully
maybe both. If it's London and local, because it's like this, that £4 million isn't a lot to spend to something that could then spark off further investigations. And if it is focused on the survivors, you need to be finding ways to facilitate them coming out and being comfortable and saying what they're saying. Look, my view personally is 100% that you should prioritize prosecution, not just of the perpetrators, but also people that have been involved in the cover-up. And I think you should aggressively go after them, as well as, that combined with support for the victims. But, what's one of the biggest ways that you can support a victim?
Yeah.
By putting that perpetrator behind bars, by that judicial process. So, those should be the priorities there. But I think with the London inquiry, I have my doubts about the national inquiry, but the London inquiry, I think that's a bit of with the amount of money that they were proposing, it's a no-brainer, because the work done on this is basically zero.
Well, I think the most important thing, aside from the prosecutions, but if you do a however many £1 million inquiry, I think it's about endorsing the victims and telling them, we believe you, we believe that you exist. I think it's something like only 2% of rape allegations make it to a charge. That's a scandalously low number. And so when we're talking about something like this, that's the context that we're talking in. It is notoriously difficult to prosecute. And so if we can't even get to the point where we recognize that there's a problem, how can we get anywhere near to the prosecution? And so it's important that the most powerful people stand up and front out the issue.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just, I think, like, look, I'm seeing coming through the comments saying, like, where were we on this? And look, in a way, I think it's a fair reaction, because media, we haven't been good enough, certainly in London, at looking at this, at covering it. It's fair. Like, we're playing catch up. Us, like, we weren't around when those original grooming gang stories were being done, but nobody went hard enough for London. And the police didn't go hard enough in London, because we've seen scandals in Oxford, Peterborough, all these other places, and they don't get followed up in London, even though there were Londoners that were being identified as part of those.
One thing I wanted to mention was that I was watching one of the most recent documentaries from Channel 4 about this topic in the North. What struck me is that when they did the original documentary called Edge of the City in Bradford in the early 2000s, one of the key sources of information for kickstarting that documentary was Bernardo's. So the reporter that did that documentary spoke to Bernardo's, and they said, listen, like, in this area, we've got child prostitution, is what they called it back then. Horrible term. We shouldn't be using that now, but that's what it was seen as. It wasn't seen as sexual exploitation in a way. It was seen as girls putting themselves at risk. And we know that sort of language is still used now. Now, in London, we actually found out during our investigation, Bernardo's went and said, guys, we've got 60 to 70 child prostitutes in Islington. We've got so many, we can only deal with 2 years of age. Like, we can only deal with 14 to 15-year-old girls, I think. So the charities were doing the same thing at the same time. They were saying to journalists, guys, we've got an issue here. But was there any of that deeper investigation? Did anyone care enough to go look at this and ask, how are these children ending up working as prostitutes on the streets of London? How are they getting there? Because you don't just end up there by accident.
Yeah, no, it's actually it's a great point actually. And it's an important parallel, and I think that is the thing of like journalists have travelled from London to Rotherham to Rochdale to Bradford, all these places when it was going on their doorstep. And look, that the Channel 4 groomed is a really good one, because it just goes for it. It doesn't. There's no sense of we've got to shy away from what we're finding here, and it go, like you say, edge of the city, which is the way back when that was being covered then. When the Times did the stuff that they did, it was being covered then. Some of the cases that we found, the Belfield Link group was being covered. That was from 2018.
And there's books that have been written about the Belfield group that actually go into detail about the allegations.
Yeah, exactly. And but with all of this, it's an open secret, isn't it? It's in plain sight. That is the point of this. That's what it's kind of it's mind-blowing, and at the same time, like, not surprising. So it's like that it could just exist there is mind-blowing, but at the same time, it's like, well, it's these things are blatant. They happen. Is that the children that they target, they do it in an obvious way. They go to the obvious places. It's probably harder to detect now because we've got this online element of it. Whereas literally in the 2000s and the 2010s, they were literally turned. We've got reports of girls in the town centres, Lewisham town centre, that kind of thing. We know of other cases where it was like cars waiting outside schools, cars waiting outside care homes. It's the same blueprint, visible there, people knowing about it, police knowing about it, probably politicians knowing about it. So are we're
just tuning into what he's talking about now.
Should we have a listen? We'll jump in and have a listen.
It's a big bill, and we're going to fall short of our ambition.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. You're out of time now. I'm moving to Assembly Member Hall.
There we go.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. Very unusually, I am disappointed in one of you, but I am completely appalled by the other. So, Mayor Khan, in January, I asked if we had grooming gangs in London. You dismissed my question by saying you didn't know what I meant. What does she mean, Chair? What is she talking about? I have to tell you, the rape victims knew exactly what I was talking about, and actually so did most other people. So would you like to apologise to all those victims of the rape gangs that actually saw you dismiss this?
Chair, I'd like to begin these topics by always thinking about the victims and survivors who've been treated appallingly over many, many years, particularly in the northern towns. And what they want is two things. One is support, and it's very important we give them support. And I'll set out shortly.
Right, so I'm just going to pause it there. He's firstly deflected that and gone straight for the northern towns. And I mean, he doesn't appear to apologise. Let's see whether he does. What do you think of that?
I was surprised that he went straight to talking about northern towns.
All right, let's see what he says.
Some of the support we've given to victims of violence and sexual exploitation. But secondly, justice to be done as well, which is incredibly important. And I've led efforts to strengthen the protection of children and those women exploited by abuse and exploitation.
Yeah. Can you just issue an apology to those rape victims that have since phoned me? I mean, I can't tell you how many people have contacted me. Would you just like to apologise to them for pretending you didn't know what these rape gangs were?
It is really important. We're talking about an incredibly serious and emotive issue to actually clarify what is meant when it comes to grooming gangs, or in the words of the member, rape gangs. According to the National Grooming Inquiry, there are a number of...
I mean, I would just say she keeps asking him to speak to the survivors, to the victims, and he keeps not speaking. Who is he speaking to?
Well, I think he's speaking to what he's prepared to say. It seems quite clear that there's been some he's well prepared for.
Yeah, but she's asking him, "Were you?" He could just apologise to them. Why is he not apologising? I think that's the question to ask.
Things that are meant by this, they include intrafamilial abuse. They include parent-peer abuse.
Okay, you're not doing yourself any favours here, Mayor Khan. Everybody knows what I was talking about, except you, it would appear. And since you're the Police and Crime Commission, that's very embarrassing for you. I didn't stop asking questions. I asked your deputy mayor and never, ever got an answer, of course, from her. In the meantime, Yvette Cooper was asking all police forces in Britain to identify cases, because obviously she realised what they were and that they were around. And it's a project called Operation Beacon Port. And in June, Yvette Cooper announced that more than 800 cases had been identified, and she expected that number to go up. But on June the 19th, you said, I choose my words carefully. There are no reported cases and also no indication of the grooming gangs that she is concerned about. She is always me, obviously, is concerned about in London. Were you not concerned about this, Mayor Khan? Because at that point, somebody must have explained to you what they were.
Well, it's because of my concern about this issue that I asked the HMI to come in and look into the Met Police Service's ability to protect our children. It's because of my concern about people being exploited sexually that the Met Police Service embedded all the recommendations made by HMI and has a child-first approach. We've had tens of thousands of officers.
Just point it out. I mean, he's deflected again. He's not answered the question. There is what Susan Hall is going through there. I'll just explain it to a little bit to people. So in January, the Home Office asked all the police forces in the country to identify grooming gang cases that might have been no further action and all the rest of it. Now, what happened? Now, what we know now is the Met they decided they were going to look at 900. Then in June, Sadiq Khan says he's got no indication that they're in London. So this is a big thing about if he said there's no indication, what we now know is that in July, the Met get handed over 200 cases. So the question has to be, did he not ask the Met? Did the Met not tell him? Or why is there this discrepancy? He doesn't appear to be answering it. He's talking about the HMIC, which is the inspectorate.
And staff trained on this very issue. But our strong partnership has meant 3 times as many cases are now being solved by the Met Police Service than before. And we funded not just record amounts to tackle violence against women and girls, but we funded a violence and exploitation support.
You're not doing very well on this, though, are you?
Crime.
You haven't apologised yet, unless I've missed that. On the 1st of July, you tell the London Assembly none of the cases mentioned by Cooper are in London. You said, I have no indication of them being in London, but the MPS understands the importance of checking for the reasons that she knows. So you're still in July, from January not appearing or admitting that you know what they are, in July still saying that there aren't any. And then, of course, the Met submits 197 cases to the National Crime Agency as part of Cooper's review. And then on the 24th of October, Sir Mark writes you a letter revealing that 9,000 cases will be reviewed following the expansion of the number of cases examined. Clearly, there is an issue in London, which is what I asked you about in January. Had you in January just said, yes, it's a dreadful thing, we're looking into it, I would have accepted that and asked the police further. But you didn't. You pretended you didn't know what it was. The rape victims have phoned me. They are devastated that they have been ignored, many of them by the police for years, and I'll come on to Sir Mark in a minute. Many of them have been ignored, but to have the Mayor of London actually really take the mickey out of them by saying, I don't know what you mean, what is she talking about? You knew damn well what I was talking about. Can I ask you one thing, and perhaps you'll give me a straight answer here, and do think about the answer. When you were an MP, were you made aware of any such cases in your area then?
Just because I care about victims, that I appointed the first ever independent victims commissioner in London. It's because I care about victims.
You have to answer the question.
What's your reaction, Callum?
So Susan Hall's directly asked Sadiq Khan if he was aware of any cases when he was an MP. That would have been in Wandsworth. in the 2010. He's immediately not answered that question. I mean, we're going to see the rest of his answer in a bit, but it's a striking move from Hall to ask that question, and
I mean,
a striking answer so far.
Yeah, I mean, he's got talking points and he's just refusing to engage with the questions. Let's see if that changes.
Questions, not go off on a tangent. I am asking, were you aware of any of such cases in your area when you were an MP? Is yes or no?
Can I just, I'm going to interrupt here. Look, we might have got an answer if we allowed him to finish.
Yes, and we're on the clock, Chair.
And we're on the clock. But that's the nature of the question and answer session.
Not if it's a yes or no.
Can we allow the mayor, all I'm saying, can we allow the mayor to complete his answers, and then you can either make your point further again if you feel they're unanswered?
It's because of my experience as both a member of Parliament but also a lawyer dealing with victims and survivors that we've invested more than £232 million supporting the victims of violence against women and girls. By the way, the previous mayor invested £27 million in his
just concentrate on yourself. Were you aware in your area of any of these gangs? I'm asking for a specific reason. Obviously, I want a yes or a no out of you. Were you aware or not?
It's because of my experience as a member of Parliament and as a lawyer that I've invested so much in supporting.
Wow.
I mean, it's quite clear now that question's been asked 3 times in a row. And
he's diverted on each occasion. Wow. Just to explain what's happening, that guy that jumped in with the funny thing around his neck, that's Len Duval, who's sort of like the speaker. Yeah. We would say that he is a Labour member. Yeah. So he's not completely, or certainly there might have been the suggestion that he's not completely impartial in his dealing with this stuff.
Victims, it's the victims and survivors where my priority has been, which is why I asked the HMI to look into whether the police was doing.
Okay, I'm going to ask the Commissioner because he answers properly. He answers questions.
So at this point, can I just intervene? Because I've been advised by the Commissioner who wishes to make a statement.
Okay.
I'm prepared to take the statement, but we won't be on the clock for the statement. It's a short statement that he wishes to make. So can we stop the clock at this point and allow the Commissioner to make his statement, and then
we didn't learn much from Khan, did we? So let's see if we learn more from Samar.
Thank you, Chair. I thought it might help to put some facts on the table. Obviously, we discussed child exploitation at this committee and elsewhere several times over the last few years. As you know, CSE was a reason the Met was placed in Engage and had accelerated cause for concern from the Inspectorate a few years ago, because we were failing victims and didn't identify it effectively, and we let children down. As we look back and the work that we're doing at the moment, we will find more failings, including cases where victims were disbelieved or investigations were inadequate. Any sexual offending against children is abhorrent, whether online, familial, or committed by others. It's insidious and devastating, with a profound and lasting effect. Group-based offending, including that characterised publicly as grooming gangs, is one awful example of the many horrific abuse methods.
We'll say this is actually word for word pretty much what he said in the letter.
This sounds a lot like the letter that was shared with the Express.
Yeah.
The look back is part of a national audit being coordinated by the National Crime Agency and Police Chiefs Council. The first phase took place over the summer, but phase 2 now is the formal start of national audits and builds on phase 1, and it will run for several years. The first stage will complete by April next year. This requires each force to identify and undertake an initial assessment of any group-based cases where there's been a sexual offence involving 2 or more suspects and at least 1 victim. That's the ICSA definition. And in these cases, where they've resulted in no further action by the police or Crown Prosecution Service. These assessments are simply a triage designed to ensure any subsequent investigation activities focused on the right cases. This definition of group-based offending, I should stress, is beyond that characterised as grooming gangs and includes intrafamilial cases, institutional-based abuse, peer-on-peer abuse cases, and others. And this definition and a first cut research across our database suggested there might be 9,000 cases potentially in scope over 15 years. And that's the update I provided to the Mayor a few weeks ago, which has led to some unbalanced reporting and commentary inferring this means 9,000 cases of grooming gangs, which clearly and explicitly the letter said it did not.
We didn't say that, just say that straight from the top.
The letter is clear on these points. It is important for us to use precise language and consider its impact on victims and public understanding. So, for example, that data-led search of 9,000, as we start to work through them, we find that some of those don't actually fit when you look in detail, don't actually fit the specification. So already having looked through 2,200, only 1,200 are in scope. So that 9,000 number will come down as we work our way through that.
Just an important point to jump in and say that there. Yes, that 9,000 will come down. But to put this in, to give a sense of scale, the total national number was 1,000. So if he's just suggested it will be round about a tenth.
Well, he said 1,200 out of 2,200 so far. So that's
already
about 50%.
Okay.
So we're looking at potentially obviously we don't know for sure, but the final figure could be around 4,500 cases.
Yeah. So what is important to note before listening to more of what he's saying is, yes, that 9,000 will come down, but you have to understand that 9,000 in the context of like what you're measuring it against. And that still will mean that even if 10% are selected, that will still outstrip the rest of the country.
And then we'll be looking for the ones where there's been nobody prosecuted and where there's potential opportunities for further investigations. We've got 26 officers dedicated to these assessments, which is about 20%, about a fifth of our specialist child exploitation teams. And that's sort of indicative of just this assessment phase creating stretch in the organisation. So to be absolutely clear, this assessment will rule out some of the initial 9,000, but I would expect the final work with the National Crime Agency to possibly identify maybe 2,000 or 3,000 cases where no one was charged and there are missed or new investigative opportunities, or suspects may still pose a risk. And I stress again, that number though will include, and it will straddle, online, interfamilial, institutional, and peer-on-peer cases, as well as those characterised as grooming gangs. The resourcing of...
I'll ask you a question, Callum. Why do they want to dilute this?
I don't know why exactly, but if you ask someone like Meg Oliver how authorities have behaved in the past on this subject, you might find an answer.
This, without damaging today's work, will require the extra funding that Casey recommended. As well as looking back, it's worth mentioning current cases. Each month, the Met records around 2,000 sexual offences. Around half of those are child sexual abuse cases across all types. Around a third of those are flagged initially as potentially exploitative, i.e. CSE, potentially familiar online. Our current caseload includes tens of complex group-based cases closest to what the public may understand by the term grooming gangs. The most serious of these cases are important,
Callum. So
that's a really important point, because I don't think we've actually had this level of detail from the commissioner before. He said tens of cases a month.
Current caseload, tens of cases a month that would be characterised as grooming gangs.
That is crucial, because at the start of the year, everyone was saying there's no indication, no reports of this, and that you could potentially giving them a lot of grace, say that they didn't understand, or there was, people weren't quite sure what we meant. And the commissioner has just said what the public would characterise as grooming gang cases, right? That's really specific. And now he's saying there's tens of them active in London a month. Have we?
Right. And also, let's just go back. What did Sadiq Khan say in the summer? He said no reports and no indication. If the caseload is tens, who's not spoken to who there? Right, let's keep watching. I mean, that is massive.
Investigated by specialist crime teams, and they include a mix of recent and non-recent offending. The ethnicities of suspects and victims are varied, including suspects from white British, black British, British Asian, white Irish, Albanian, Afghan, British Indian backgrounds, and others. This is reflective of the diversity we see in the city. In these cases, we do not see the typology reported elsewhere where there have been cases of offending committed by groups of Pakistani men on white British children being the sole or majority case. It will be part of the picture, but it's not dominating in the way that's been reported elsewhere. Several of these cases are also in time with criminal exploitation of children around gangs. This is a snapshot in time Our data isn't perfect, and I'm sure the numbers will fluctuate. The Mayor's already mentioned some of the improvements we've been making, and in fact, we've been solving 3 times as many cases in recent months as previously. These are across lone and multi-handed offending. We've trained 11,000 officers to identify exploitation. We've got 72 more people in our exploitation teams. We've given specialist training to 1,200 detectives identifying exploitation and trauma-informed practice. We've got new terms of reference focusing on perpetrator disruption, and 23,000 officers trained to avoid victim blaming. This work was recognised by the HMIC and led to us being removed from the Engage programme alongside other improvement work. Our early identification is improving our understanding of exploitation in London, and CSRE reporting will continue to rise as these improvements take place, as you would expect. It has a knock-on effect on our resourcing, and we need to very, very carefully balance our work on today's live cases with our work looking back on historic cases. And we expect the reinvestigations to take several years and to potentially take at least 60 or 80 specialist officers over that extended period. And as I say, as Baroness Casey recommended, they need to be fully funded so as not to be stripped out from elsewhere. Funding is not the only challenge. The skills required in these officers are not in great supply, and building that capacity and skill will take time. We're determined that with others, the Met will safeguard the victims of all child sexual abuse wherever possible.
See, there is one thing that I've just realised as he's speaking there. Obviously, he discussed ethnicity, but I think that's the first time that he actually acknowledged that gangs of the type of Rotherham and Rochdale will actually make up some of the picture.
Yeah, no, that is interesting because, of course, he talked about the ethnicity of both victims and perpetrators being diverse in London. And you would probably expect that, as much as you expected for it to exist in such a massive city, you expect it to be diverse. But he's actually gone further and said that it will include some like the types.
Which one? But what that to me says, I think that is highly significant because what that means is we're probably going to have some case that's coming down. You don't get the commissioner mentioning, oh, this is part of the picture, unless there's something within that picture that they must think is serious enough that this might come to the public's attention. So we really want to stay tuned for that.
But most of all, I wanted to lay that out because of the complex mix of offending we're talking about and the complex mix of demographics of offenders, of victims, offending types, which there's too much ready reach to simplistic analysis, which risks misleading the communities. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that statement. Just before I call on Assembly Member Hall, I want to, as we go immediately to her to continue our questioning, can we start the clock? Assembly Member Hall.
Thank you. Sir Mark, there is no way I don't understand that this is a very complex matter. I would like to point out that I never at any point said to the Mayor Pakistani groups. I am more than aware that the groups in London are from very different demographics, which is why I was very specific. My biggest disappointment, which is what I referred to in the first place, is that on the 11th of February, I think there were 4 or 5 of us from the Assembly that had a private briefing with a commander, I won't name him, and we were told absolutely there were no sorts of grooming gangs of this type in London. Now, I pursued it because...
I'm just going to pause it there. This is, again, a massive bombshell that Susan Hall has just dropped. She's just said that not only was the mayor up there saying no reports, no grooming gangs, the police spoke to her, what did you say, a private brief?
Private brief. I mean, I think I know who the commander is. I won't say it either.
And told her, I mean, so, which... it just seems, I don't understand how that can be possible when they were reviewing.
Well, and as we've just heard from Sir Mark Rowley, tens a month of grooming gangs that you would characterise like that. So it looks like Susan Hall is about to spike the commissioner, and we know that she loves the Met.
This is huge. This is not lightly done. Yeah. No.
I had so many people calling me about it, but whether that was to put us off questioning or what, I don't know. But it was such a disappointment to me because Clearly we have. We've got 9 million people here. It cannot be that London was ever going to be the only place. We don't have this specific issue. Now, I know when you flag different crimes, I know you do that. Have you always flagged grooming gangs as a specific? No.
No. So 2 points. Firstly, I'm sure that commander, if that was the impression you left, that wasn't his or her intention. One of the things we've been dealing with is that complexity I've laid out.
I'm sorry, but she said no. I mean, what could possibly? I mean, he's got to defend the person that's beneath him. I suppose that's being a good boss, but that seems that seems tough to believe, right?
Well, yeah, and you've got to question who sends out a person to give out that information,
and making sure people don't leave with a sort of a simplistic analysis of the problem. We are good. Our data is good where crimes fall in tidy boxes. So if you ask me how many burglaries we've got, because burglary is a crime type, our systems tell us that well. Sexual exploitation cases fall across allegations of rape, sexual assaults, human trafficking, a whole range of different types of offences. And so you've got multiple types of offences, and then we ask officers to flag where they think exploitation may be involved. It's a much more complex picture, which makes the data more messy and difficult, which is also why when you do a data cut, you get 9,000 to review, and as you work your way through it, you find only a subset apply. So that's so that's why this is always going to be slightly messy in the picture, and it's only this assessment process, actually looking through records one by one, which will get to an accurate picture of history
I
and
think,
how many we need to look at.
I think, when did you put a flag in for grooming gangs?
It's not for grooming gangs, it's for exploitation.
So you've never done a specific one for grooming gangs, and you still don't?
So we do it for exploitation. There is no national definition of grooming gangs. We're using for this the group-based offending ICSA definition, which is sexual abuse of children,
Okay, I'm
at
running
least
out
2
of time.
offenders, at least 1 victim.
Okay, I'm running out of time. There's so many questions, but as you know, our big beef is that you don't come to Police and Crime Committee. If you did, then I'd be able to ask all these other important questions. The only other quick thing I'll say, Chair, is that the pink ladies that came and stood outside, most of them grandmothers, were not allowed in today into the chamber, which I'm very disappointed about. I haven't got any more time. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I'll look into that and see what was the main reason for that. There has to be a reason, but let's see what it is, and if we need to take it up with the City Hall officials, we will do. Okay, let's move on to Assembly Member Garbutt.
Afternoon. I want to start with the BBC Panorama documentary into Charing Cross, and I want to start with the Commissioner.
This is Zoe Garbutt from the Green Party now asking about
Panorama.
Let's think about what we.
So yeah. It could be that grooming gangs come up again, but we're not necessarily expecting it. If you're just tuning in now, we need to go back through the bombshells that have gone through. Right, so let's go from the top. The first was Susan Hall asked Sadiq Khan to apologise to the victims for his behaviour and his response to questions, what we discussed at the top, when she asked, do we have any grooming gangs in London? He said, I'm sorry, can you be more specific? His response was to say it's important. He referred to the northern victims in northern towns, and it was important to focus on them. You could tell he was trying to be quite serious, but I think he refused 3 times to apologise.
Yes. Yeah. Oh no, it was actually the question. He didn't apologise when asked, but it was when he was asked specifically, were you aware of any grooming gang cases when you were an MP, which was about 2 months worth? He didn't answer that question 3 times. Kept going off on different topics. Yes. Right. So yeah, but he was definitely asked to apologise twice. Oh yeah.
And he didn't apologise to begin with. The timeline that we had discussed previously was not addressed. So basically what happened was after he pretended to Susan, or he said to Susan Hall that he wasn't aware, it then came out that the Met had been reviewing cases for the Home Office and had submitted a number, and he has continued to say there are no indication of these type of groups. None of that was cleared up. He was, like you say, he was asked specifically about his historic knowledge of these, and
he didn't answer that. He could have said that's not a question I can't answer now. I can go away and check. He didn't have to completely ignore the question. Would you say?
I think it's like what. Look, with these things, their interactions there. It's a kind of a moment for Susan Hall to make her point and for him to respond, and he's doing the classic PR thing of changing the conversation. So I say, Callum, have you done this? And you say, well, what we really need to think about. I just think with these issues, it's like you could. I don't look. Tell us in the comments. Do people just want straight answers, right? If it's a yes or no answer, answer it with a yes or no. If it's an apology, do you want to just front up? He doesn't want to do that because it's the victims that he was speaking to there, right?
Well, yeah, that was what Susan Hall was asking for. Victims that she says have been calling her ever since that exchange went live. So some of those people we've probably come across as well in our work.
Yeah, and then so we get the questions about the ones. Now, Sadiq, we didn't really learn anything because all he did was he started talking about other initiatives. So every time Susan Hall asked him about grooming gangs, he would then talk about other work that had been done, in terms of violence against women and girls, or VORG as he refers to it. Now, the commissioner, very different, right? We got a series of absolutely huge revelations, which actually raised more questions about what Sadiq Khan knew and why he has said what he said.
Yeah, the commissioners came out, set his stall, said, I want to deal with facts now. And then went on to sort of some reporting about all the 9,000 cases being about grooming gangs, which of course we've never reported that.
I don't. I think there's. I've seen some bits on social media, but like broadly, that has not been the interpretation. We certainly never did that. As soon as we like. It's not necessarily easy to understand, like, because reopen and review are two different things. Review is they just go over the case notes and go, do we need to reopen this? And then reopen it, they start investigating again, right? So that is clear. Now, some people have said that it's 9,000 cases. I don't think that, like, we certainly haven't done that in any of our reporting. But what did he then said specifically about ongoing cases? That I think that is one of the biggest bombshells.
Well, specifically, he said that when it comes to grooming gangs as they would be characterized by the public, the stuff that we're talking about, the stuff that Susan Hall asked the mayor and Met Police commanders about earlier this year, he said there's tens a month. And we have to remember at the start of the year, there was no reports, there was no indication. In fact, until quite recently,
so I think, I mean, to like summarize a little bit in terms of, for me, what really stood out was the commissioner there acknowledged that there are tens of grooming gang cases a month, which
I think historic and active.
Historic and active, but tens of investigations a month. That then equates to hundreds a year. Now, admittedly, Susan Hall got into it and said that these weren't necessarily being defined as grooming gangs. He also, after discussing ethnicities, said that what was it, that Pakistani Muslim, as the type that had been seen in other areas, would be part of the picture. That is, again, another significant shift from what we've had in terms of the public dialogue previously, because that was not, there's been strong pushback on that. And as Susan Hall said, the ethnicities of those involved are certainly diverse. Our investigations and reporting certainly reflects that. But I think it's quite dangerous when you start making absolute statements about this, which is the case, and now they have rowed back significantly by saying the opposite. And I speculated that potentially that we could have some stuff coming down the road if he is saying that that's part of the picture.
Should we, for people joining, could we actually go back maybe and watch?
Why don't we?
There's probably not much point watching.
Why don't we?
The mayors, but let's go right back to what Sir Mark Rowley said when he was asked by. Maybe even a bit further.
which was his statement. It's interesting that he's looking at the camera, Susan, right? So this was the big, I think, where we got the most, because the back and forth from Susan Hall, we didn't learn much from Sadiq Khan, other than he wouldn't apologise. Yeah, so this was largely what we knew from the letter that we saw a couple of weeks back. Right. So Tens per month.
I don't know if that's. I'm just want to be clear. This is important. Is that current caseload that they are working on right now? Tens.
Yeah, because what he does is he starts at the beginning. He says we get 2,000 a month. Then it goes half of those are child offences, and then within that basically goes down, 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 and then within that we have tens of current and historic that would be characterised as grooming gangs. Tens per month. So that's, he said tens per month. Let's be honest about it. That's, hundreds per year, at least 100 a year, which is a huge.
Well, if they're working on it, we don't know how long each investigation is. Sort of, if you have at any one time tens per month.
Yeah. Okay.
I thought it was interesting there when he said that they have 25 missing child exploitation teams working on this. Is it?
So, can everybody hear us? Is that coming through that we've got on there?
Can you hear me as well?
Yeah. Can we? If I can stop sharing the screen and you can just see us now, and we'll just talk through some of the stuff that we got. So, go back through from the top. Sadiq Khan, we didn't really learn much, did we?
No, he was asked first by Susan Hall, can you apologise for the way you answered the questions in January when Susan Hall asked Sadiq Khan, do we have rape gangs in London? Do we have grooming gangs? And he said, he said to the chair, what does she mean? And refused to answer the question. I think it was 9 times back then. She asked him, do you want to apologise to the victims who she says have been calling her in the sort of 8 months since that exchange went viral? And then the second question that she put directly to the mayor was, were you aware of grooming gangs when you were an MP in Wandsworth between, I think, 2005 and 2015? And he didn't answer that question 3 times when it was put to him.
Yeah, he kind of deflected and went to talking points on each occasion. I mean, I think it appeared to me, I don't know, that Susan Hall was aware that he was going to filibuster to try and just talk his talking points. So she kept interrupting him. She got warned by the chair of the assembly, although it was a slightly strange moment because she was asking a yes or no, and he repeatedly refused to do a yes or no. So,
I think that I am a bit surprised that the mayor didn't. I know he was gonna. I didn't. He was gonna prepare an answer and say something, but it didn't seem like he particularly even set his stall or went out and said anything that impactful when he would have known that this was coming up and he had an opportunity to say something or sort of set the tone himself, and he didn't even really take that. Like, of course, he's somewhat on the back foot here, but it was an opportunity. He's had weeks to prepare for this. He could have prepared something that maybe even met like a middle ground between what Hall was asking of him, but he completely deflected.
He didn't even engage on the topic, which is interesting because he has addressed the issue of grooming gangs in interviews with journalists, which begs the question: why is he more comfortable doing it there than in the chamber? Because he has addressed that.
Chamber is live, isn't it?
A chamber is live, but what's going on? Look, Sadiq, we'd love to interview you and go through all of this stuff. So the offer's there. We could go. We want to speak to you. We want to speak to you directly. I don't know what. I'm sure plenty of our readers, viewers would also like to see that happen. So whether we were to get more straight answers out of him, I don't know. But we didn't learn much other than he refused to apologise and he refused to answer the question about whether he knew about this.
But interestingly, in his answers, he actually departed from the line that he's given to journalists, was that I've left no stone unturned. I've always, I can't remember the exact wording, but it's I've always been clear with the Met. And actually, he didn't say that today, but he has said that in the past. So I wonder was that intentional? Because he may have well thought that if he said that to Susan Hall today, she would come right back at him.
Well, that was her point, wasn't it? Yeah. Because she was saying, I asked you about this. Why didn't you, why didn't you do something on it? Or why did you pretend that it wasn't there? So if he then said, I've always been clear, look, it would have been an interesting clash. But I
think he avoided that.
It's telling,
clash.
right?
Yeah.
It's telling. He looked very uncomfortable. Sadiq Khan is a pretty, look, regardless of what you think of him, and I know a lot of the commenters don't like him, he is a politician that doesn't come unstuck often. Now, some people argue that's because he doesn't get a lot of scrutiny, or that, he's in a kind of very Labour-safe place. But you don't often see him looking that uncomfortable. And I would definitely say he did not look like he was enjoying answering those questions at all. He was shifting about all over himself. It's a very stark contrast, rabbit in the headlights, compared to how he was
on ULEZ or something like that.
January was when I was referring to.
Yeah.
Like he
It's not like he hasn't faced some politically testing moments, but he's always been bullish in his answers. I think he's sort of a boxer politician, but today certainly he didn't look like that at all. He's not scared of standing up to Donald Trump. In fact, that's kind of a dream scenario for him. But today, being asked pretty simple questions by the opposition leader.
He was almost he allowed himself to be interrupted. I think potentially if you're a communications person, I don't want to get too deep into this. He was sort of, I guess, wanting to put it on her, like have her be the one that was. I'm just trying to answer the questions here, type of a thing. But
it's important to point out there that there were times where Khan was going in to answer what Susan Hall had asked, and in the first sort of 10 seconds of his answer, there was no answer to the question, and then Susan Hall would jump in. And some people might say, like, why is she jumping in there? Because why didn't she just let him answer? Well, they're on the clock, these questions. So if it's filibustering with the person answering the question just doesn't answer. So I think Susan Hall made the point herself when she was pulled up on interruptions, like, no, I'm actually trying to get the answer here. And the best way they can do that is just repeatedly ask the question, and there's no sort of escaping the fact. And she's put those questions as yes or no questions as well. Yeah. They are yes, just like in January, these are yes or no questions. But the answer, you could argue that these sort of questions, maybe it's not simple to give a yes or no answer, but I think at least you can address the question,
acknowledge the question, perhaps. Yeah, that is telling, because I don't know. He knows that now everyone will see he refused to apologise. Everyone will see that he refused to say on 3 occasions whether he was aware of this in the past, whether he's aware of this as an MP in Wandsworth. And we're going to have a look at that, aren't we, Callum?
Yeah, I think if there's any other journalists watching this right now, at any other papers, they'll be raising their eyebrows at the way that question was handled.
Yes. Well, it's the same as in January, wasn't it? Where it was something is denied that then we later find out that there's something else there. Now he's not drawn a line in the sand. He's not answered whether that is. Now whether that means he does, whether it means he doesn't, we can only speculate. But what we do know, established now, that is on the record, is that Sadiq Khan was asked 3 times, was he aware of grooming gangs when he was an MP? 3 times he didn't answer the question directly. He responded with something else. Twice, at least I counted, he was asked to apologise for his behaviour in the previous session. He also avoided answering that question. I mean, one thing I struggle with a bit is if you get asked a question about survivors in London and then you start talking about northern towns, survivors, what kind of message does that send? I mean, that's saying, oh, well, we see these girls up here, but these are the people in your city. These are the ones you're supposed to answer to, right?
Well, yeah, I think if you're not going to apologise, and you could, if you were in his shoes, you could say like he doesn't want to be drawn into sort of a political apology game or whatever. Okay, but you're given an opportunity to maybe address survivors in London directly. You can say, in that moment, you can say whatever you want to them.
Yeah. And he was looking at the camera. I think it was like this is a little bit of a, it's a bit political theatre, right? Isn't it? He was looking at the camera, but it was not a confident performance. I think I'm disappointed that we didn't get more answers out of him. When he spoke to ITV a couple of weeks back, he was a lot more, he at least dealt with the topic directly. With this, we just went back to, the question is, what do you know about grooming gangs? And the answer is, well, actually, I do a lot about violence against women and girls. And that's not the question.
Yeah, I think the point, Sadiq went straight to talking about violence against women and girls, and that is important. And he also talks about the fact that he commissioned one of the Met Police inspection reports. But I think it's important to commission them, but I think that makes it even more important that we recognise that he will have known about the stuff that was in the reports and that we sort of brought up in our investigation.
Yeah, I mean, look, every time that he mentions the HMIC reports, look, I don't know it for sure, but it shows that we had visibility of the investigation. Well, we showed within those reports that he keeps mentioning, there were examples that Maggie Oliver confirmed had the same patterns of grooming gangs. He commissioned the reports. He read the reports. He responded to the reports. And then he denied that there were grooming gangs. And now he's reminding everyone that he commissioned the reports.
Yeah, and let's remember that the Met Police Commissioner just now has come out and said that they're dealing with, we've got a caseload of 10s a month. I'm not quite clear on the time frame, but it's
10s. Like... look, what we can say is grooming gang investigations, which is what he said, because he narrowed it down. He wanted to say thousands, even though, I mean, look, I appreciate that he's doing that because he doesn't want to blow it up and make it seem like a bigger issue. It shouldn't get hundreds of grooming gangs in London. That, is potentially hundreds, thousands of victims. You do that over a longer period of time that this has not been dealt with properly. It's thousands, tens of thousands that we're talking about. It's beyond the scale of anything else that we've seen in the country.
And the Met Police in the child sexual abuse cases, the 9,000 that they're looking at for review, and then these are group-based that they're not looking at. And now I don't know what that caseload, the tens of cases a month includes. Does that include cases before 2010 as well? But, we know that even the review, which is great and is going to cost lots of money and they're putting resource into, that actually has a cut-off point. So I think if you're someone who survived this in, say, 2009, you'll be asking, why does my case not matter?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, what we should say is that those cases, it's not that there still will be cases from that time period that are investigated. They just won't come under the terms of this review. I mean, this 9,000 thing, it's like, it is a large number. They've included all this other stuff. And I think that what credit to Mark Rowley for explaining that down. But at the same time, that whole thing to do with taking a big number and then bringing it right down, is a kind of distraction from what we really want to know, which is just that number.
Well, again, it brings up the question is that they shared a letter with the Express with us like a couple of weeks ago now. They obviously knew about this tens of cases involving grooming gangs as they would be characterized with the public, and yet they chose not to put it in the letter. They put it out now, and then they complain about the figure being misreported or misrepresented, and yet they had a very clear opportunity to just be fully transparent and just give an exact detail figure in that letter. I mean, they've had that opportunity for the whole year. You know, it's just Baroness Casey said in her audit, why is it that the media have to drag authorities kicking and screaming to be transparent on these issues? Why? And we're seeing it yet again.
Yeah.
You know, these police officers, commanders, Mayor of London, they will have read her order. You'd hope they would have read it. It's a huge topic for policing in London, and I hope that they took mind of that line, because I don't understand why we can't just get clear answers on this.
Yeah. Well, look, I think you've seen it all. Look, you can watch it back again. Some explosive moments there. Some incredibly strong new lines from the police that have come out. We're going to keep following this topic. If you want to watch more that look back at our investigations into grooming gangs, you can go to the Express page and go to our playlist, and you can watch through right from the start, or you know, how this story is unfolded, and we're going to keep adding stuff in there as it develops.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for watching, and we're still investigating this. So yeah, if you have information, it's worth reaching out to us as well.
Yeah, come to us. We always want to hear from people and hear bits of information. I mean, we should say, go to the police first.
Of course, yeah.
You know, speak to them. We want them to bring these people to justice. We want them to do their job. Too many of these survivors have been waiting too long. But yeah, we're going to keep following this story, and we're not going to give it up. So yeah, take care, everyone. Have a great day.